So Dana White and the UFC have to be worried about the repercussions of CTE right now. I'm talking about scrambling in the back offices, looking at documents, medical records, financial statements, anything they can find to defend themselves against the mess that could be coming their way. Now, as many of you know, there are currently 2 antitrust lawsuits going on between the UFC and its fighters, Lay vs. Zuffa and Johnson vs. Zuffa. And Lay vs. Zuffa reached preliminary approval for a $375 million settlement. Now, although there's a hearing for final approval in the coming months, there's also another hang-up. According to some legal experts on X, the attorney fees will cost a total of $115 million, and the hours and expenses must be presented to a judge for approval to make sure the amount is justified. Now, according to this settlement, a $335 million settlement was denied by the same judge in July because he said the amount was too low and it combined both the Lay and Johnson lawsuits against Zuffa. So now the UFC increased the number another $40 million to $375 million for the Lay vs. Zuffa lawsuit, and the Johnson vs. Zuffa lawsuit will still see a payout for the fighters as well. Now, it's important to also note that the amounts paid in both cases will go to fighters under contract from 2010 to 2017, which is the Lay vs. Zuffa case, and the Johnson case will pay out fighters under contract from 2017 to present. These lawsuits ultimately accuse Zuffa of violating antitrust laws by paying UFC fighters less than they were entitled, and as a result hurt other MMA promoters by creating an unfair advantage in the marketplace through quote-unquote years of anti-competitive tactics. And the lawsuit goes as far as to accuse them of creating a scheme to create a monopoly in the market to acquire fighters. And if you don't understand all this complicated legal talk, the main thing you should understand is that in a free marketplace, there should be competition for services, meaning the highest bidder essentially will get the work. But what the UFC was able to create was a brand that fighters wanted to go to more than anything else, and essentially exploited their name value by getting managers to convince their fighters to take less money, according to the lawsuits. And when you reach that point, it doesn't really matter what you offer fighters as the other promotions, because they'll turn it down just to go to the UFC in order to get more name value and recognition. But all that aside, the biggest point in my opinion in this whole case is that the UFC may have more lawsuits to come as a result of some of the fighter testimonies that were submitted while the settlement was awaiting the judge's approval for the second time. And more than 150 fighters involved in the lawsuit provided statements begging the judge to approve the settlement ASAP, citing not only financial hardship but physical ailments including CTE. Now, of course this was bound to gain traction, right? And it did, because one of the statements were so profound, it had former UFC fighter Brendan Schaub in tears reading it on his podcast, because it was from his friend and former teammate, former interim heavyweight champion of the UFC, Carwin. Now, Carwin's testimony basically detailed his physical struggles as of late as a result of his MMA career and revealed he's showing symptoms of traumatic brain injury and CTE. While fighting for the UFC, I suffered many significant injuries, including concussions. I fear that during my career, I have suffered traumatic brain injury and am noticing symptoms common with TBI and CTE, including addiction, depression, mood swings, and irritability. Despite having a degree in engineering from the Colorado School of Mines, I have been unable to maintain adequate focus to hold down an engineering job. I face serious challenges in meeting basic everyday expenses for food, shelter, transportation, and in basic life skills necessary to function. This would truly be life-changing money for me and for other members of the class. These funds would also allow me to obtain the healthcare I need and keep a roof over my head and food on my table. I desperately need these funds now. For me, a significant recovery in the near future is much more appealing than the possibility of a large recovery several years from now, especially in the light of the possibility that there would be no recovery at all if the settlement were not approved. Carwin. And here's Brendan Schaub getting very emotional on his podcast while speaking on Shane's struggles.
Despite having a degree in engineering from Colorado School of Mines, I've been unable to maintain adequate focus to hold down my engineering job. I face serious challenging meeting basic.
Damn.
Former world champ. I face serious challenges in meeting basic everyday expenses for food, shelter. Fuck. He has kids. Give me a break.
Now, of course, several blogs and journalists in MMA media reposted and reacted to this video of Brendan, right? Which has done nothing but further the conversation to the extent that people are now beginning to question if other fighters could be struggling with issues similar to Carwin. So since this news has gone somewhat viral, of course Dana White's being asked about it left and right, And on 2 separate occasions, he's been asked about fighters' testimonies, in addition to Shane Carwin's testimony, and whether or not he plans to do anything for him and future fighters.
And you read some of the testimonials that were turned in from the fighters, like begging for this money and saying like what, you know, how bad they needed it. And, you know, you kind of think of just the sport as a whole and how it goes further on. Is there any way, I guess, the next generation of fighters can avoid being in these positions with, you know, health
No, I
issues
mean, if you think about back then, you know, if you look at some of these guys that are in this thing, some of them are when we were in the hole, however much money. And it's like the early days of baseball. Like the money that's being made now is much more than the money that was made then. 10 years from now will be the same as today. You know what I mean? There'll be more money then. It's just, and you can't control how people are going to spend their money. It happens in the NBA. It happens in the NFL. It happens in Major League Baseball. You know.
And after UFC 308, Dana seemed to get annoyed with this reporter for prodding at the situation yet again and appeared to cut him off after the first question.
There was a podcast that said that Shane Carwin had dementia started. Will the UFC help him out somehow for this person who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame?
What's the question? Would we do what?
Would you help him out somehow?
We have been helping him out. We have been working with Shane Carwin for a long time.
Мы уже давно ему помогаем, уже давно с ним работаем.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, ma'am, in the back there. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Hi.
So Dana clearly kept it very brief in that clip, right? But what do you think? Is Dana low-key worried about more CTE claims coming out from fighters? Because remember when the players sued the NFL for dismissing the true dangers of CTE? That ended in a $765 million settlement for the players now. So that's why Dana White is probably appearing to be sensitive or vague about this topic, because he has to be careful about what he says when it comes to fighters and CTE in the sport. So that's all I got for you guys today, man. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to join the family. And let me know what you think in the comments. Is the UFC scrambling backstage for medical records and all kinds of other documents to help prepare themselves for another legal battle with the fighters? Alright guys, I'll be back with another video real soon. Peace.